Steve Bannon moves closer to getting his conviction thrown out. The Supreme Court of the United States this week vacated his conviction for contempt of Congress. But wait, didn't he already serve his time? Yes, he served 4 months in prison, but the conviction remains on his record, so to speak, and that's why the appeal is worth pursuing, especially when the U.S. Supreme Court rules in your favor. Now, Bannon is a staunch supporter of President Trump. In September of 2021, he was served 2 subpoenas by the House committee investigating the January 6, 2021 incident at the U.S. Capitol, a subpoena for testimony and a subpoena for documents. Now, he ignored both, according to the committee, which referred him to the DOJ to prosecute him for contempt of Congress, which is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 12 months in prison and a fine. Now, contempt of Congress is rarely prosecuted. When individuals refuse to testify, it could be for partisan political reasons. Now, it's not been shown that Bannon's refusal to testify and produce documents wasn't partisan. It was. Partisanship is the very reason why he refused to cooperate. Now, whether contempt of Congress is criminally prosecuted is up to the DOJ. Now, whether or not the DOJ prosecutes, the House can file a civil lawsuit to try to enforce the subpoena. And that, in my view, could be more effective, the more effective course of action if the goal is to try to obtain assistance in getting testimony and documents. Because on this channel, we all realize that the Congress sometimes needs help eliciting testimony. For example,
who is Chris Malin?
Was the president aware? Please stop talking. It is not your time to ask questions. It is not your time. I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. Chair.
One second.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Vermont.
Was the president aware of Secretary Lutnick's ties to Epstein when he chose him to lead the Department of Commerce? Was he aware?
Chris Malin was a Border Patrol agent.
Okay, so I'm going to conclude that the president, in fact, did know about.
Now, the members of Congress are in a position of power when questioning witnesses, and they often abuse that power and end up grandstanding instead of questioning. Now, a district judge can assist with that process. He or she is a neutral arbiter from a separate and independent branch of government. Now, both sides will present their best arguments to the neutral arbiter, who was appointed by one side of the aisle, that's true. But once they're in the job, it's a lifetime appointment. Now, they cannot be removed except for extraordinary misconduct. And so the fear factor in politics becomes vastly reduced for district judges. Now, the fear of political retribution is vastly reduced as well. So theoretically, a civil action is usually preferred unless the political divide is such that it would be a waste of time to file a civil action. In any event, the House committee referred Bannon for criminal prosecution to Biden's DOJ, which prosecuted Bannon. Now, he was found guilty by a jury, served 4 months in prison, and paid $6,500. Now, he appealed the conviction to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. A 3-judge panel affirmed the conviction in May of 2024. In June of that year, his request for a stay of his sentence pending appeal was denied. He sought a rehearing en banc, which was denied in May of 2025. Now, he filed a petition for certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the DOJ had opposed Bannon at every step until January 20th, 2025 at President Trump's inauguration. Now, the DOJ decided not to oppose Bannon's cert petition. The DOJ's brief informed the Supreme Court that a motion to dismiss the indictment had been filed in the district court. An indictment can be dismissed even after a judgment. So the Supreme Court granted the petition, vacated the judgment of the Court of Appeals, and remanded the case to the district court, which should dismiss the indictment, since the DOJ is no longer pursuing the case against Bannon. Now, the progressives are saying, how dare they? Wait a minute, though. Prosecution of crimes is an executive branch function. Now, if a prosecutor decides to stop pursuing a criminal case, in most cases, the court should grant the motion to dismiss. So, should the district court grant the motion to dismiss? Yes, because there's no irregularity, there's no corruption in dismissing the indictment. Now, the prosecutor decided to stop pursuing the case. Bannon caught a break because DOJ stopped pursuing him while the case was still viable. That is, before he had exhausted all of his appeals. Now, in fact, if the case isn't dismissed by the district court at this stage, Bannon could file yet another series of appeals. Now, going to the substance of Bannon's case, he says he didn't willfully defy the subpoena, but was waiting for a ruling on President Trump's claim of executive privilege. And he says he was advised by his lawyer not to testify. Now, at the time, there was a palpable sense of retribution in the air in the nation's capital because the Democrats in Congress so hated President Trump, and they had all the power then. Now, we all realize as human beings it's difficult to sustain that level of hatred for an extended amount of time. Now, there's a lot less of it now. At the time, there was hatred in the air, and in my view, it goes back to 2016. The Democrats in power thought Hillary Clinton should have been elected president. She wasn't, and they just couldn't get a grasp on that. Now, the Clintons are like demigods in the Democrat Party. Now, for example, when she and Bill Clinton left the White House, remember there was a controversy? She took some furniture with her. Now, it belongs to the United States, but they felt entitled to take it with them. Now they're saying Hillary Clinton for 2028. Now, about the January 6th, 2021 incident at the U.S. Capitol, those individuals who stormed the Capitol and were later arrested and charged, they shouldn't have done what they did. Certification of the presidential election results is a ministerial task, largely symbolic. But more to the point, President Trump had nothing to do with the storming of the Capitol. He didn't tell them to do that. Now, he pardoned them because the Constitution gives him that authority. A pardon doesn't mean he condones their actions. Now, lots of criminal defendants get pardons, for example, under Republican and Democrat administrations. And it certainly doesn't mean that a president who grants a pardon condones or commanded their actions in the case of January 6th. Now, some of the defendants might have claimed that President Trump did condone or command their actions in their court cases, but he didn't. And they've been pardoned. So that's the end of the matter. It is over. For Steve Bannon as well, it might finally be over. He caught a break with the timing at the U.S. Supreme Court. The district court will probably dismiss his indictment in short order. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.